City Manager's oral report, Potomac River Generating Station site update.
Okay, I'm going to turn this over to the manager to introduce the presentation as well as our presenters for the evening.
Good evening, Mayor and Council and the community. So tonight, really my pleasure to introduce a really pretty exciting project for your consideration, the community's consideration. This is in regard to the Potomac River Generating Station redevelopment. With me tonight, we have the developer HRP group in the audience, available for your consideration. Tonight really is an introduction of their proposal to the city, much like what we did with 5001 Eisenhower, where the developer proposed some level of city investment, and we bring this forward to the city council and have a period of time for the public to provide that communication and that feedback and input. I'm also joined with tonight with our CEO of our Alexandria Economic Development Partnership, Stephanie Landrum, Julian Gonzalez from our city CMO staff, and Bonnie Brown, Deputy City Attorney, are going to help me with the presentation tonight. So today is really the start of a community conversation in regard to this proposal. But what I would highlight is that this is not a new proposal. This project has been with the community at least for the last 3-4 years with a series of conversations as well as entitlement processes that city councils have taken action on, has a significant community presence over the last 3 or 4 years. And really what this is about is trying to get this project to construction. If you recall, since September of last year, on a monthly basis, we've been providing a economic profile or summary of what's happening with the economy, particularly related to national, regional, and city economy. And as we're all aware, that economy is sluggish. Inflation is up. There's challenges in being able to develop property and develop opportunities and to grow revenue streams that provide necessary services to our community. It's probably more so now than ever before, since tomorrow night you'll be hopefully adopting a budget that has a lot of great things in it, but it's dependent upon the ability for revenue to grow in our city, and a big portion of the growth of that revenue is through development growth and property tax growth, really through some of these types of projects. This actually will be one of the largest projects the city has undertaken. So with that, not that short a presentation. There you go. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about some background and context to frame the conversation. Stephanie Lander is going to cover how this aligns with our city council priorities and the recently adopted Alex Forward, which is our economic development strategy. Bonnie Brown's going to describe a little bit about the legal framework for the tool that's being used or being recommended to be used for this. And then I will summarize the developer's proposal for the city investment, as well as some next steps as it relates to process and community engagement. Oh, we also have Paul Stoddard, our planning director, in the audience, and Liz Bolton and Ebony Fleming on the communication side. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie.
Thank you. So I feel like this is a site that needs very little introduction. It is perhaps one of the most unique sites in the city, but for context, we're talking about almost 19 acres located on the Potomac River. For those of us in the room who have been around for a while, this was an active coal-fired power plant not too long ago, and our community came together to, one, close it down, but two, recognize that this site represents the ability to catalyze a lot of new investment and redevelopment in the Old Town North community. And so following its closure in 2012, the city engaged in a small area plan process, which is what we do when we see areas where there is potential growth and where there's opportunity. And so following the closure or the closure and the stopping of the operation of the power plant, we engaged the community in a small area plan that was adopted in 2017. And as part of that 2017 plan, the community envisioned a mixed-use development on the site of what was perhaps the dirtiest operating business in the city. Fortunately, after that plan, HRP, which at the time was Hillco Redevelopment Partners, also bought into the vision and came in as the purchaser of this site. And so since 2020, the city has been working with HRP and their partners to take the Old Town North small area plan vision and turn it into an actual development and reality. And as you all know, that involves going through a rezoning, which was approved in 2022, and the first of its kind coordinated sustainability strategy, which the City Council endorsed in 2023. So lots of work so far to get us to where we are. Despite that work, though, there are some unique hurdles that are affiliated with this project and this site. So the obvious is that it was a very dirty industrial use, and there is a significant amount of remediation and cleanup that needs to take place. And that is very costly to deconstruct, abate, and remediate, but it also requires extensive outside party coordination. We're not familiar with coordinating with outside bodies, but this site perhaps involves the most amount of partners because of its location, because of its previous use, and because of what is adjacent. And so we're talking about everything from environmental quality to FAA because of its location along a flight path, to Norfolk Southern because of the rails that used to serve this site and are still adjacent. So these are very unique circumstances that require a lot of coordination, but also translate to cost and time. We have been working diligently with HRP and our partners to see if there is any other body that would be interested in investing and helping with this cleanup. And unfortunately, there has been very limited state and federal grants available. And so all of those things have led to earnest efforts to move this project from plan to construction. At the same time, costs in all things have continued to rise, right? From labor, from products, from all construction costs, et cetera. And so the cost to do all of this has continued to rise. From the commercial standpoint, we have been marketing this site as the Old Town North Small Area Plan envisions it as a mixed-use community. And we have been trying, again, in earnest, to find arts and cultural uses, to find people interested in doing hotel construction and financing and office tenants. And again, you've heard us many times over recent years, those things are not very... They're not making investments in many places, but they certainly need to be able to move into communities where there's a project underway or where there's investment already happening. So that is why we're here tonight to talk to you then about an investment proposal. And so wanted to remind the community and council that before staff brings anything to council, there is a lot of work behind the scenes to make sure that what's being proposed or potentially considered is aligned with council priorities, but also other adopted plans. So for 18 months, we were able to, we'll get to it. For 18 months, we were able to have a really meaningful conversation with the community about what economic development looks like, but also how we consider requests for investment. And so the proposal that the city manager and team is about to discuss with you is aligned with the economic development investment decision matrix. That's a mouthful, but it is part of what we discussed as a community about when and how we consider requests for assistance. And so it is aligned with that. It is also, this site is identified in the Alex Forward plan as a catalyst site. And for your background, catalyst sites are ones where an investment is very likely to catalyze other investment and will create not only tax revenue, but job opportunities, sense of place, in this case, cleanup of a site that is of high priority for us. And then the other alignment is with your own priorities. The two that this specifically speaks to are economic strength, in that it would be taking a defunct site and turning it into a vibrant and tax-generating site, but also creating a significant amount of new housing units, so it speaks to your housing opportunities.
So I've got the next couple slides. In front of you is a simple graphic that really takes a complicated project and tries to identify what the city obligation is, which is on the left side, what the developer obligation is on the right side. The way this would work for the community's sake is there would be a performance agreement in which the obligations would be specifically spelled out with specific timeframes, with specific guarantees, and the developer would be obligated to achieve those. If they do not achieve those, the funding does not get obligated. So on the city side, the request is for a 30-year use of tax increment financing, or a TIF. The city has used a TIF before. The most recent would be the Landmark redevelopment, where we have the new Inova Hospital going in. It is a traditional tool that is used. That obligation would be $135 million over a two-phase project, primarily to cover the.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Manager, to interrupt. IT, for those who are watching online, they can only see Councilman Chapman's screen. They cannot see the slides.
Okay.
1 second.
Yeah.
Okay, looks like we're back up and running.
Okay, so just to reiterate, it's a 30-year tax-free increment financing, which is a TIF. It's traditionally used as a tool, particularly for very difficult redevelopment opportunities that have unique characteristics like this one does. The total obligation, max obligation of the city would be $135 million over two phases. Again, remind everyone, this is a performance agreement. You've got to deliver the project in order for the funding to be achieved. On the developer side, their obligation is to provide basically public infrastructure and site readiness investment, which is things like open space, it's the new streets, it's the stormwater, all of those things at 150, and traffic mitigation. Over $155 million is obligated for that. The developer would be responsible for building the infrastructure, not the city, building the open space, not the city, demolishing the power plant, not the city, and completing the remediation, again, not the city. I'd also highlight that given the type of environmental remediation and abatement that's necessary, there are not many firms in the country, other than the firm that we're fortunate to be talking with tonight, that can both do that type of work as well as the redevelopment. And I think that's really important, because the ultimate goal here is the true environmental cleanup of the property and a quality redevelopment that follows that. And that compounds and maximizes the opportunity for our community for everything from the benefits that the open space would provide, the access to the waterfront, the housing opportunities, the ability to take advantage of wonderful amenities. And from a city standpoint, it helps, again, support city services that are going to be necessary. And the third, and I think very important, is this investment would unlock roughly a $2 billion value that the developer would be obligated to create out of the 2.5 million square feet of mixed-use development. And that is very consistent with the previous entitlements and process that has gone on in previous years. One other highlight, again, Devani Brown is going to cover a little bit more about tax increment financing, but just to be really clear to the community, the way that tool works is that this would not involve any pledges of existing taxes. This would pledge new taxes, new revenue that the developer creates. Again, there would not be any of the taxes that we currently use for any city services. It would simply be for new taxes that would be created and based on the development. The other element here is that unlike city general obligation bonds that are secured by general fund revenues, what's proposed here in terms of that $135 million is the use of a community development authority, which would utilize and secure those bonds out of the incremental taxes. So again, they're pledged based on the revenue generated from the site, not by any obligation that currently exists from the city. So there's a really good, strong protection. This is a little different than in the landmark redevelopment project. The city actually used general obligation bonds, which means they were backed by existing taxes. This is not backed by existing taxes, existing revenue. This would be backed by new revenue. And I think that's really important. And this also, this type of tool does not affect our bond rating and does not affect the capacity of our bond issuance. Next slide.
Okay, good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm going to just briefly walk through a few more details on the financing structure that's proposed to support the public infrastructure elements of this project, and that's specifically the tax increment financing, or TIF, paired with a community development authority, or CDA. So first, the TIF. As the manager just explained, tax increment financing allows the city to use future new tax revenues that are generated by a project to fund certain project costs. Importantly, we're going to define those tax sources in the agreements. They'll be limited to only certain tax sources, and no existing city revenues will be used. So the concept is pretty straightforward. If approved, the project would help pay for itself using new tax revenues that it creates. Second element is the Community Development Authority, or the CDA. And a CDA is a separate political subdivision that can be created by localities in Virginia, specifically for this kind of purpose. It's authorized by the state code to issue bonds to finance certain project costs. As the manager stated, bonds issued by the CDA would not be a debt of the city. And CDA financing is also limited by state code to effectively limit the kinds of things you can use the revenues for, the proceeds for, like public infrastructure. So how this works together is pretty simple. The project will generate incremental tax revenues, and that revenue will be directed to the CDA. The CDA would then use those funds to pay debt service on the bonds issued to fund the public infrastructure. And again, as has been stated, it's not a new model. It's been used across Virginia, including here in Alexandria, the Landmark Mall redevelopment project, the Mosaic District in Fairfax County, and Boston Quarter and Arlington have all used CDAs to support some major redevelopment projects. There are several important protections built into this structure for us. First, as has been mentioned, no city revenues are pledged beyond the project itself. The CDA is also planned to include a backstop mechanism, which would allow the CDA to impose a special assessment on properties within the CDA district. So if there's a shortfall in TIF revenues generated by the project, we could close that shortfall with an additional special assessment on properties within the district. No other properties in the city would be affected, only those within the CDA boundaries. Second, we have a reimbursement model in place, meaning that bond proceeds would be dispersed to the developer only after work is completed and verified. It's a performance model. So together, these would help ensure that the financial risk remains limited and project specific. So just a couple of next steps in terms of process. Step one would be we'll come back to you and request authorization for the city manager to enter into a development and performance agreement. And later, we would be returning to the City Council to create the Community Development Authority. That requires a petition of property owners and would involve a public hearing and adoption of an ordinance.
Great. So I have the next couple slides. So just a little bit on the timing. So as I said, we were talking about really two phases of the project. The first phase is the anticipated completion in 2030. with hopefully a construction start by the end of 2027 or early 2028. That would include from the bottom of the screen to the top of the screen, they're broken up into A, B, C, D, E, and F sections. So phase one would be block A, B, C, and phase one open space. Phase two, which would be anticipated roughly 4 years later, would be block D, E, and F, the pump house, and phase two of the open space. This, in total, the realization of this plan would encompass up to 2.5 million square feet of commercial and residential development with a projected capitalization of over $2 billion, and provide over 5 acres of publicly accessible open space on the site, as well as significant off-site improvements, easily totaling over $80 to $100 million of improvements. So of our 135, the bulk of that is going to public infrastructure improvements, including parks and open space and amenities that the entire community can benefit from. Currently, HRP is in the planning review process for the first phase development, which includes blocks B and C, the waterfront park, and the rail corridor park. HRP has conducted site tours and led community engagement with neighbors, particularly in the Old Town Alliance and other stakeholders as part of the planning process, and will continue to do that through this next effort. Per the CDD, up to 2,000 dwelling units are permitted. Phase one would include the deconstruction of the power plant, the associated environmental abatement and remediation, the site infrastructure, the open space. So it's a significant large project, 2.5 million square feet of space. On the infrastructure, there we go. So this slide talks a little bit about the financial plan itself. So I think Bonnie did a great job, but I want to just reiterate that this type of financing does not risk our city AAA bond rating and does not use existing dollars that the city is currently using for other purposes. These dollars come in through the construction of this project, and it facilitates the payment of the $135 million in investment for mostly infrastructure improvements. This project also includes an affordable housing component. That affordable housing component involves a delivery of on-site affordable units, including all residential phases of the development, a financial contribution to the Housing Trust Fund, a 3P project to construct a dedicated 100-plus affordable housing unit in Phase 2. And then, as you can see in the approved CD, the project's affordable housing contributions can be used to help facilitate the on-site affordable housing project. I want to go back. We missed an important slide, so can you go? There we go. I think this is a very important slide because it kind of gets from a community standpoint, why would the city do this? Other than the fact this is an incredibly difficult site to develop, it has significant environmental impact to it. It's a large site that has significant public infrastructure necessary, and it's a very, very difficult site to redevelop. I think this really highlights some of the funds and how they'd be used: roadways and street improvements, utilities, the open space, the deconstruction of the coal fire plant. But the return on investment, I think, is really important. If you look in the back, at the bottom, over the course of this financing period, $1 billion in gross incremental tax revenues are estimated on this site. That is new gross incremental tax revenues. Those are dollars that the city does not have today. Those are dollars that can help pay for city services and programs that the overall community benefits from. If you remove the debt service, that 135 million or so with the debt service, the balance of $770 million in cumulative incremental tax revenues for city services come in. So those are funds available to the city to use for purposes to help pay for the types of things that the community expects. And it also provides a pathway of 160 affordable units. Okay. In terms of the process, again, I think this process really started several years ago with our HRP or Hilco at that point. But this is a little bit more specific process to provide the council with an opportunity to make the decision on whether to move forward with a form of investment into this project to get the project under construction and completed. So if you'll notice on the slide tonight, we're really at the introduction of the presentation. Then there's a significant period where the developer has a community meeting on May 4th, then AHAC a meeting on May 7th, and then throughout the entire month of May is a series of conversations and communications, including information on our website that people can provide input to. And then this would culminate eventually to get into to the City Council in the June timeframe for consideration in regard to the performance agreement. So there's a significant lead time here, but it really does represent an opportunity for the community now to be introduced to the developer's proposal, and then the opportunity for the community to provide their input. You can see on the left side where community engagement says alexandriava.gov PRGS. You click that, that'll have all the information, much like we did for the 5001 Eisenhower, as well as some additional information during the course of the engagement to provide to the council for a final decision on this, hopefully in June. Wanted to share a little bit on some of the renderings. Again, this is sort of what I would describe as the vision, not necessarily the exact construction, obviously, but what it really shows is the type of quality and the type of change catalyst that this project can be to the Old Town North area, which is doing amazingly well with a lot of construction already. Just to summarize here, you'll see the QR code, which provide for opportunity to provide feedback. HRP is requesting the city's investment to close this funding gap and to catalyze the redevelopment of the site. Under this proposal, the city would create the Community Development Authority to issue the bonds and use taxes that are generated by this project to pay that back. The structure would not impact the city's bond rating. It's been used successfully elsewhere. This project would create an environmental remediation and cleanup for a contaminated site on the Potomac River waterfront. It would provide critical public infrastructure that connects the site back to city streets and improves public access, especially along the waterfront, including more than 5 acres of open space. It has a $2 billion in private sector investment, resulting in over $770 million in tax revenue over the 30-year bonding period, and it creates more than 1,000 housing units, including approximately 160 affordable. And the first phase is intended to be completed by 2030, and this decision would come before council in June. And it has the opportunity to catalyze over $2 billion in value over time. So when we use terms like value, we use terms like revenue, what that really is about is, particularly in budget discussions and things like that, those dollars can be put into the community to pay for needed support services and support programs. Mayor and council, that's really the summary of the presentation. Again, this was the introduction. We've got a long way to go before it gets in front of you in June. And be happy to take questions or any type of comments. And then we'll continue to proceed as we showed on the slides.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Manager. At this time, I want to open it up to my colleagues to see if there are any questions or comments. Vice Mayor Bagley.
It's really not so much a question. We've been talking about this for a long time, and so I actually, I've toured the site. I've been to a lot of community meetings. I want to commend HRP. I mean, they are oddly, for nothing having been built yet, they already sort of feel like a part of the community in Old Town North because they're present. I feel like at so many events. The thing I wanted to just highlight is that I really appreciate is we're not sitting and waiting until conditions change in the hopes that conditions change and in 5 years we'll get. I mean, what I really want to applaud here between city staff and everybody who worked on this is we're finding a way to keep this moving and because those 1,000 housing units are needed yesterday. And if we wait 5 years, 10 years until they'll only be more needed and more expensive when they arrive. So I just wanted to express my appreciation for what I think I know was a lot of effort, by many people in our staff and on the HRP side to craft this proposal and with real dates. I mean, 2030 is very real, and to be opening up. This is an area where we have not had access to this as Alexandrians for 60 plus years. So just that alone is a significant step. So I'd love to ask a question, but I think the information is there. Yeah. But I just wanted to lift up that I support this, and it is important, and I hope what the community sees is this is action taken to keep this moving, to accelerate development, and to create housing and commercial activity that would be stalled effectively otherwise indefinitely. Because what I didn't hear really in Ms. Landrum's presentation was, well, or we wait 3 years, or we have a backup. I mean, I say that not critically, but I didn't hear sort of the backup. So I support the plan, look forward to the public meetings and having the proposal come back to us in the future.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Bagley. Councilman Alibi.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Question, the numbers, just to clarify. We are talking about $2 billion. That's not just this project. That's what's going to be catalyzed by this project, correct?
Correct.
Okay, great. So the $1 billion, that's just this project, or that's what?
That's this project.
Just this project is going to bring in $1 billion that we don't have over the course of the 30 years.
Yeah, the investment, the development itself will create that. And of that, when you look at what the tax base would be, that's about $770 million.
Got it. Okay. And then the $2 billion is the taxes that's going to come in from the catalyzation, or that's the value of the development that's going to occur because of this project?
Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Councilman Anubi, I'm Julian Gonsalves, Strategic Projects and P3 Director. So $2 billion is the investment that the developer will actually put into the project in order to create all that development. That generates a tax base that will result in $1 billion to the city, and then part of that will go to pay the debt service, and then there's $770 million that will be available to the city to provide city services.
Okay, great. So if we can go to the slide that had the 770 and the 1 billion, and just to
which slide?
So there was a slide that.
Slide 10.
I think it's
Yeah, because I just want to know how did we get to 770 from 1 billion, and we're putting in 135. So just that the math makes sense for everyone who's looking at this.
So the the 135 million is the upfront proceeds. So that will have interest payments associated with that. So roughly the 1 billion plus is about 1.1 billion, and then there's about 300 odd in debt service associated with that for the 135 million. So that leads to 770 million. So the 135 million results in 320 odd and a million in debt service. So 1.1 billion, subtract the debt service, that leads us to 770 million.
Okay, so what we're actually putting into the project from the future proceeds is not 135, is 135 plus the interest.
The interest related to that.
Okay, just to make that clear. So 135 is what we're taking out in debt, but it's
Upfront.
not what we are going to put into this project
Over the course of
over the course of the 30 years. Got it.
30
Great.
years, yes.
Thanks for clarifying that. Well, I mean, I certainly appreciate the creativity. I appreciate staff's hard work on that. I think the three things that stood out to me that I want to lift up, it's how it doesn't impact our AAA bond rating. That's a great thing. How it's future revenue. We're not using our existing revenue. And that a lot of this money is going to the infrastructure. I think all of that really makes me feel good about this. Certainly looking forward to hearing from the community and looking forward to you guys coming back to us. But just wanted to lift that up and appreciate your work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Al-Nubi. Councilwoman Green.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I have two subjects, but the first one is on Ms. Brown, your slides with performance model. Could we go back to that slide? And could you briefly clarify for me, if this project does not perform as expected, what happens?
Yes. So first, to answer the question about the performance and reimbursement model, the developer will be responsible for all the costs up front to put in the infrastructure, and then there'll be progress payment reimbursement from the bond proceeds. So we'll be able to inspect and verify that the work is being done, pursuant to all of our plans and specs with the city. And then in terms of the sort of second part of the question, the anticipated completion dates that are up on the slide, we are in the process of negotiating what the enforcement mechanisms would be on that, but I would highlight that this is broken out into two phases, and the term sheet as written does not obligate the city to move forward with phase 2 if the performance milestones for phase 1 are not met. So that's one important tool, is if we have sort of the optionality to not go the full 135, but to stop at phase 1. And basically throughout the process, if timelines are not being met or standards are not being met, benchmarks, we'll be able to have the ability to sort of cease the payments prospectively. So there's the time between phase 1 and phase 2, and then also even within a phase, if there are issues, we're negotiating terms that would limit what we would reimburse them going forward if they were out of compliance. We don't expect that to happen, but there will be tools in the agreement. Yes.
So those mechanisms we will see when this comes to us in June?
You will see them in detail in June. Yes.
Okay.
The specific dates and what those mechanisms will be. There's a line in the summary of the proposed terms that's now live on the city's website that basically says that we're negotiating that, and that those enforcement mechanisms will include potentially not proceeding to phase 2 or stopping any disbursement of funds to the developer. So those two things are in there now, but we'll flesh those out as we move to June. Yes.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Manager, can you talk a little bit about, will any of the affordable housing be placed in phase 1? Or whoever can answer that.
Sure.
So there are about 60 units which are provided across the site irrespective of the P3 project. Out of that, about 19 units right now identified as a part of the Block B and Block C development. So 19 of those units will be, at a minimum 19 will be part of phase 1. Block A right now, we haven't yet started the DSCP process. So it depends on what's the residential there. So that would be proportional. The 100 units is affordable housing building by itself, all affordable building. That there's an affordable housing kind of strategy plan. I think it has been identified to be in phase 2. And so we have what we have created here, which is in the summary term sheet. It's a pathway to creating that affordable housing project with a no later than date. So we have some mechanisms of making sure that developer contributions could be used, that they are provided to the city no later than 2034, with some mechanism if they're making progress to kind of give some potential good fit for its extension on that. But 2034 is when we are aiming to get all those developer contributions and also any escalation in order to decrease the funding gap on developer contributions from phase one. So that's kind of the framework. More details are provided in the summary, which is online too.
Councilman Chapman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A couple of questions I had that I think have started to be teased out. First one I'll go into is I believe somebody talked about what would happen if things weren't good by the end of phase one. What does the project look like if we stop at that point?
Well, phase one would include Block A, Block B, Block C, and a portion of the open space, and the site remediation. So it's pretty balanced between phase one and phase two. That would not be an ideal scenario, frankly, if we did one phase and left the other. I think if phase one is successful, phase two will move forward, easily, given the investment that the developer would put into the project.
Thank you. And that answers my question. The second one is: are there any major changes to the economic landscape that we need to be mindful of as we look at this particular deal? If rates change ridiculously, if things in the White House policy-wise change in a particular area, is there threat of really changing the dynamics of what can be done here?
So that's a great question. I think that's one of the reasons that we're bringing this forward to the council now, is to try to, we know the current state, at least the short-term current state, as it relates to interest rates, as it relates to some of those things. I think the market gets uncertain later in the year and later in the federal administration term, frankly. So I do think that the things that I think we want to watch very closely, I'm sure the developer is as well, is the supply chains, the cost of what I'll call major construction. What does the labor market look like, when they're ready to construct? The good news is this is a very experienced developer that knows what they're doing and works in very large cities as well. So their ability to manage that is probably more nimble than a small company that does not have that capacity. But I think that it would really be the supply chain. It would be labor. It would be, the how fast they can finish out their financing to get this project to get under construction.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Councilman Aguirre.
I just want to say that I'm very excited for this project and to be seeing it move forward. So full steam ahead.
My comments were going to be similar to Councilman Aguirre. I think one of the things that the manager started us with was a reminder that this project is not new. And then when Ms. Landrum went through the timeline, I think this theme came up for me of community. It's the community that came together to fight to take down the plant. It's the community that came together to shape the Old Town North Small Area Plan. It's the community that's been working with HRP in order to design what this would look like and how do you bring that vision to a reality. It's the community that came to multiple public hearings and everything for the rezoning. It's a community that came together for ALX Forward. And I think it's that theme that we're asking the community to come join us for again. This is the introduction, as was stated. There's going to be a number of public meetings and conversations for people to dive into some of these technical terms, to understand more clearly what a TIF is, why we use it, and how it's benefited us. And I would just remind people that I think sometimes in order to do what we want to do for our community and to provide the services that we keep hearing about, about throughout our budget and all our other conversations, requires us to come together to think of creative ways to spur new opportunity to generate those resources to do those things. And I think a perfect example I get to drive by on the other side of the city every day is what is happening at Landmark, and watching kind of the power of what happens when you do leverage community feedback, community engagement, partnerships, and creative tools to move things forward. So I'm really excited for the next phase of the conversation, which is remind folks that if the website to go to is alexandriava.gov/PRGS. There you can find the full timeline. I'm pretty sure you'll probably be able to find this presentation. You'll find some other proposed information as well as opportunities for you to engage between now and June. And then it is in June when the council will be presented with the two actions that were mentioned earlier. First, a direction to the city manager to enter into the agreement, as well as a direction should we choose to go into creating the CDA. So I want to just thank staff, and it's a lot of work. I want to thank our partners from HRP. I want to thank some of the community members who I know are online, because they're the ones who let us know when the PowerPoint was not working. And so I think it's just a reminder of how much this project means to our city and the opportunity we have to recognize not only the environmental impacts, but a chance to activate a new space for us. So more to come, but thank you all for the presentation.